It's time we got off our assets. Hello again, Vince Graham back with Part 9 in the series. This segment will outline a new direction for the Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum. Let's start with the great Bill Trenholm, a Confederate blockade runner during the war between the states. Trenholm was a Charleston businessman who later served as President Cleveland's Comptroller of the Treasury. In an 1884 address to the Charleston Chamber of Commerce, Trenholm said, "In an old community, conservatism prevails in all things and is eminently respectable. But conservatism is out of place when it clings to antiquated methods of business and shuts its eyes to the requisites of progressive prosperity." Be aware, this segment calls out antiquated methods and proposes changes to the status quo. If you find the idea of change frightening or are in a state of denial with your head in the sand, then confronting reality may cause anxiety. You may wish to stop now. Confronting reality is key to gaining awareness for what is actually going on, thus allowing one to make an intelligent response. Because if a response is not based in reality, it will be based in fantasy. Now, fantasy can be fun at the movies, in football leagues, and in the bedroom. But when applied to the problem of unfunded maintenance liabilities, fantasy precludes progress and may actually make the problem worse. This makes it even more difficult to achieve a goal. So as emotionally challenging as our problems may seem, we must keep in mind that bad news does not age well. Leaders charged with stewardship public assets must confront reality and take responsibility. The upside is that constructive tension surrounding change can spur the imagination and lead to better things. Take the Cooper River Bridge, for example. The old bridges served us well, the Grace Bridge since 1929. But as fondly as they might be remembered by some, they grew to be functionally obsolete. The new bridge that replaced the old is now a celebrated icon of the Lowcountry, one which enhances transportation choice and encourages healthier living practices. Another example of change, guided missile cruiser USS South Carolina. The South Carolina was in service for 24 years, even longer than the USS Yorktown. Over her career, she received numerous commendations. Having served her country with honor, she was recycled, and in 2009, her bow made part of a memorial plaza at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Warning, the following may be too much for the viewer subject to denial. That psychological defense mechanism in which a person faced with an uncomfortable fact chooses to reject it, insisting that it is not true despite what may be overwhelming evidence. Keep this warning in mind before continuing. While serving on the planning team for Patriots Point in 2009 and 10, I found most people had a difficult time discussing the USS Yorktown. A fixture in Charleston Harbor for more than 30 years, this noble ship is considered by many to be a sacred relic. It is often referred to as the most popular tourist attraction in the state. This may have been true at one time, but now it's not even among the top 5 attractions in Charleston County. 2 county parks, the aquarium, Fort Sumter, and the Charleston River Dogs minor league baseball team all draw more people than the Yorktown. And despite increasing amounts of money spent on advertising, attendance continues to drop. Over the last 10 years, it is down by more than 25%. Meanwhile, deferred maintenance costs continue to mount. They've been estimated at somewhere between $80 and $120 million for the Yorktown and $10 to $20 million for the USS Laffey and submarine Clamagore. Moreover, the ships require an estimated $5 to $10 million in annual reserves be accrued for ongoing maintenance. In the face of declining attendance and mounting costs, one must ask if this is sustainable. And then there's the question of morale. The Yorktown is not a ship that sails. Sunk in 27 feet of mud, it serves as a function of memory as opposed to active participation. Ask yourself, do deteriorating exhibits honor the men and women who served in the armed forces? Do they provide a proper example for our children? Do baby boomers wish to saddle future generations with such large unfunded liabilities? With regard to the first 2 questions, the answer is clearly no. With regard to the third, expecting the young to shoulder such a burden is presumptuous and unfair. Yet, like 3 monkeys, the present leadership seems to want to make a political game of this. Is it all about political expediency? Do they really care? The late Harry Hallman, former mayor of Mount Pleasant, member of the Patriots Point Development Authority Board, had this to say in 2006. The story is the same at naval museums across the country. They take in enough money to mop the floor and sell tickets, but they don't take in enough to preserve the integrity of the hulls of the vessels themselves. So what is to be done? Several ideas have been suggested to make the Yorktown more attractive to visitors and slow its deterioration. One comes to us from Battleship Memorial Park in Mobile Bay, where the USS Alabama, which is much smaller than the Yorktown, rests in 22 feet of mud within a cofferdam built in 2002 at a cost of $4.2 million. Like Patriots Point, the museum in Mobile contains various military exhibits. Also like Patriots Point, these exhibits incur costs. The cofferdam is prone to leaks. Hurricane Katrina caused the Alabama to list 8 degrees to port. All told, the museum suffered damages in excess of $7 million. Another idea would be to give the Yorktown away. This is the USS Forstall and USS Saratoga, decommissioned carriers docked at Naval Station Newport in Rhode Island. In recent years, veterans groups made efforts to try to move the Saratoga to Jacksonville and the Forstall to Baltimore Harbor. These efforts were unsuccessful as the groups were unable to raise the $3 to $5 million it would require to move them. The fact of the matter is the U.S. Navy has hundreds of decommissioned ships rusting away in yards and Ghost Fleet reserves around the country. With no clear purpose or use for these ships, the Navy works to recycle them for scrap and sink them. For example, the USS America served her country honorably from 1965 to 1995, at which point she was scrapped and sunk in 3 miles of water off the North Carolina coast. The USS Oriskany, or Mighty O as she was nicknamed, an Essex-class carrier like the USS Yorktown, was in service from the end of World War II to 1976. For the next 20 years, the Oriskany was kept in various shipyards and was eventually scrapped, towed offshore, and sunk in 212 feet of water, 25 miles southeast of Pensacola. The cost of environmental cleanup and to prepare her for sinking was $20 million. Today, the Mighty O has become the Great Carrier Reef, named one of the top 10 diving sites in the world. A recent university study reports it has an annual economic impact of $4 million to the local economy. Like the USS South Carolina, important parts of the Oriskany were preserved in a memorial plaza. Similarly, perhaps the Yorktown could be given an honorable burial at sea and become part of the state DNR's artificial reef program. If the Yorktown were to be given an honorable burial at sea and made into an artificial reef, what would replace it? A few ideas. Recall from Part 7 the idea of creating marinas controlled by locks like the one at Windmill Harbor on Hilton Head. This overhead view shows the approach docks and lock, which could be easily accommodated within the existing cut at Patriots Point. But what would be done with the 1,400 feet of existing dock, 700 feet north to south, and the same length east to west? Refurbished, the docks could provide excellent facilities for tall ships like the Spirit of South Carolina and the Spirit of Bermuda, aboard which every school student in that country does a tour at sea. Perhaps an exchange program could be worked out. The Adventure, docked at Charlestown Landing, might be brought over on occasion and given more exposure. Other historic ships like the USS Constitution might be brought in for 1 or 2 months at a time. Working with the State Ports Authority, the city of Charleston now serves as a major port of call for Celebrity and Carnival cruise lines. These lines target the economy end of the cruise market with megaships like the Carnival Fantasy, which is bigger than the Yorktown. Mount Pleasant's refurbished docks might target the small cruise ship industry. These boats offer a more intimate cruising experience. Here's a small one alongside a megaship to show difference in scale. They are more environmentally friendly than the megaships with low emission, low smoke engines that can be turned off at night. Cruises feature small ports with a focus on wildlife, the environment, and local culture and history. Other ideas. This is a Canadian naval destroyer. It recently made a port of call in downtown Charleston. The Pathfinder-class oceanographic ship is operated by the U.S. Navy with a civilian crew. It recently made a port of call in Finland. And this is a photograph of Finnish high school students who toured her. Other port cities entertain active naval vessels. If Charleston and Finland and New York can host active Navy ships, why can't Patriots Point? Our ample docks could be refurbished to accommodate ports of call by Navy cruisers, destroyers, submarines, Coast Guard cutters, and oceanographic ships. Just as they have for thousands of years, today's youth are enamored with people on board ships who have been places and arrive in port with stories to tell. Unfortunately, static exhibits aren't as enticing, which is why few people living in the area ever visit the Yorktown more than once or twice. Active ships making ports of call will keep people coming back, much the same way a new exhibit at the aquarium or at Charleston's various museums keep local people returning. Active duty sailors also inspire children's imagination and provide motivation for careers connected to the sea. Thanks for watching. Please tune in to Part 9B, which outlines further ideas for a rejuvenated naval and maritime museum.